Now, there are a lot of pros for living on the US Virgin Islands. Life moves at a much slower pace, and it's less stressful, unless you're actively seeking out the problems. Now, Hurricane Irma did destroy a lot of the scenery. Before, it was known to be one of the most beautiful parts of the United States, but the great thing is it's been recovering, and it's still a beautiful destination to see and do things at. There are the beaches to swim and sunbathe at. You can go hiking, kayaking, and paddle boating. There's also a lot of marine life where you can view life on a coral reef. You can also go to the shark pools or hand feed a stingray. You can also swim with the sea lions if you wanted to. And the waters of the Virgin Islands are known as some of the best sailing waters in the world as well. But anyways, yes, there are a lot of pros for that retirement on the US Virgin Islands, and I can go on. But you clicked on this vlog to hear about all of the cons of living on the US Virgin Islands. So let's look deeper into the 15 cons of why the US Virgin Islands wouldn't be a good place for retirement. Give me a thumbs up on this vlog if you agree with my points, and if you don't, just give me a thumbs down and comment below for the points you don't agree with. But let's get into them right now. Number 15, thinking you won't care about anything. They say the Caribbean life is about taking it slow, but it's actually not true. You kind of have to care about a lot. It's not all about lying down on the beach and doing nothing at all. If you own a home, you still have those plumbing emergencies and have to replace those busted window screens to keep those mosquitoes out, like a million of them. You also have to maintain your swimming pool, replacing the chunks of concrete that are broken off. But maybe you don't want one in the first place. But the point is, the list goes on, just like problems you might have in your own home right now. Not that I'm saying that you should focus on the bad, but it's best to keep it in the back of your mind that those emergencies do and will happen. Number 14, it's hot. The sun does burn, as in many Caribbean, South and Central American countries. That's just the reality of living in a place tropical. And sometimes everything you touch is hot. An example would be that of a lot of people who travel by motorcycle for transportation. And if your inner calf is exposed, you'll be burned from the motorbike's tailpipe, leaving a scar from the heat. You'll actually see that this is quite a common occurrence with the new people lined up in the hospital for these types of issues. Even some that lead to accidents with broken bones because of the shock of the heat. How are you going to enjoy your time in the turquoise waters with an injury? Number 13, healthcare. Now, the quality of care isn't the best. Some even had to leave because there wasn't a specific specialist that they needed on the island. Even visiting the ER could have you waiting for a better part of the day to see someone. And number 12, it's expensive. It could also be a more expensive lifestyle if you're not careful. Everything is generally more expensive. You'll definitely need to learn how to spend and live with less if you don't have enough. Many of the homes that you'll find in the Virgin Islands sell for more than $1 million. But if you live in one of those major cities, then you might find one for about half the cost, but overall it's still expensive. Of course, there are cheaper accommodations, but each have those unique challenges that aren't present until sometimes later. Condos are there as well, and other cheaper alternatives, but they might be connected with a busy resort too. Number 11, power outages. Now, there are also power outages and spotty cell phone coverage. People are at times unhappy with the internet availability and the speed in some places as well. Number 10, humidity is noticeably bad, especially when you walk from the house to the car, becoming drenched in sweat. When you're sitting on those plastic beach chairs, your butt gets swampy, especially being in that wet bathing suit because it never dries. You need to always carry around a dry change of clothes or bring a lot of baby powder. Number 9, not part of the state. Now, living in the US Virgin Islands, you're not part of the state, and your legal residence will disqualify you from voting for a presidential ticket, even if you're paying into the Social Security program and paying federal taxes. So that means you'll be stuck with whatever administration comes into office and what they decide for the country without full representation. So you can't use the national form to register to vote if you decide to move to the Virgin Islands. But if you decide to become a resident and live there full time, then you can register to vote to the local elections. That means you can have a say in who becomes governor over the territory. Number 8, hurricanes. Now, this point you need to seriously consider being next to the warm Atlantic water that create those nasty tropical storms that are known to wipe entire neighborhoods off of the island. You'll be dealing with those significant storm surges that can cause plenty of flooding issues. And even though the US Virgin Islands doesn't usually take the full impact of the hurricane, maybe just a close shave on the outer edge of the cyclone, you'll still be dealing with downed power lines, flooded roads, toppled trees, and infrastructure damage that can limit your movement for days, if not weeks. You also want to have a generator, extra supplies, and fresh water available to manage all of this. And you'll need to also cross your fingers every June. August and September tend to be the two most worst months for these storms to blow through. So you'll definitely need to know how to prepare your property to manage the heavy winds and rain that will come if one passes over. Most neighbors come out to help one another to get ready, which helps to bring the whole community together. Number 7, employment. As mentioned earlier, Hurricane Irma caused a lot of damage to the Virgin Islands, but it's re-emerging. Outside of the tourism industry, the government, and a handful of retail outlets, there isn't much of work. The unemployment rate actually typically hovers around 10% in any given year. The storms damaged or destroyed homes and businesses on the islands, including multiple high-rise apartment buildings, and the locals have worked to get the islands back on their feet, clearing rubble and sorting through debris. But everything has been re-emerging newer, better, and stronger than before. So unless you secure a job before making your move, you may need to dip into your savings quite a bit to make ends meet at first. But you could try and start a side hustle of your own. Some artists and other specialties have made it their home living outside the island's economy. Number 6, bugs. You'll sometimes need to search for scorpions in your house, like checking your sheets and shoes. There are spiders as well as tarantulas wanting to share your living space, as well as the larger centipedes that come crawling through the walls. Mosquitoes are also an issue. They are smaller, faster, and could carry serious diseases like dengue fever. So if you're planning to move to the tropics, you'll need to come in terms with giant spiders, roaches, frogs, snails in the washing machine, lizards, snakes, mice, and cocoa rats really quick. Number 5, less goods and services and modern conveniences. This is where you need to adapt by going to several different grocery stores to find what you need. You'll discover that living on the Virgin Islands means being self-sufficient. There are few shopping destinations, the occasional mall here and there, but the buildings are not as large as you might expect. The reason this is the case is because the cost of transporting goods to the island. Anything that is heavy, bulky, or large is going to come with an expensive shipping charge. You'll also find that most of the residents purchase used goods for their homes. So if you really need something, they have to be shipped. And on top of that, you'll have to wait a while for the things to arrive as well. Number 4, relearn how to drive. You'll discover that the lanes are for left-handed driving instead of being on the right. Both the British Islands and the US Virgin Island follow this law, even though most of the vehicles driven on the islands have the steering wheel placed on the left-hand side of the car. That means you'll need to get used to driving under different conditions, which could be a challenge for some. And the traffic can be terrible for the place you choose to live as well. You might need to take a ferry ride to a different island so you can get groceries that you need for the week, and it takes planning to navigate and get essentials like toilet paper that might be out of stock or in short supply. Number 3, crimes. Now this is a concern for most everyone from any country, but keep in mind that much of it is gang related. As with any place in the world, you'll need to be mindful. Some areas are actually crime free, but there are places in larger cities where you may need to deal with some significant issues, especially when it comes to violent crime. The United Nations actually reported that the US Virgin Islands had the highest per capita murder rate in the Caribbean and the 4th largest in the world. Guns are used twice as often in a robbery and 3 times more often during an assault than the global average. Number 2, beachfront properties are minimal. Now, commercial development is usually priority along the beaches, so having a home right by the water is almost impossible. But there are those places in the mountains that have those opportunities with numerous condo complexes offering an opportunity to purchase or rent. But that's where everyone targets, and there's also the fact that 70% of the island is a national park, and most of the housing is in the structure of weekly villa rentals. Number 1, isolation. It's also a very transient place for expats, so you're always saying goodbye to someone. It's also an expensive place for family members and friends to visit. But of course you can make friends with the locals, but it could get pretty lonely without your close ones around. The cost of housing, groceries, home goods, and everything else has to be managed for your guests as well if they do come to visit. But the people of US Virgin Islands are friendly, and it's up to you to start making new friends. You're only going to probably see your loved ones once or twice a year at most anyways, so it could get pretty lonely at times. Now all of these points do add some challenges to consider when living in the Virgin Islands, but many find that once you establish a residency, you'll find that life feels pretty normal as it was back home. There may also be some communities or neighborhoods that are more willing to embrace you than others. So you'll experience the support of the locals and friendliness of your neighbors once you figure out that you want to stay. And if you like that slower pace of life and don't mind the added expenses and the problems I just mentioned, then it could be that paradise you're looking for. Looking past all of the cons discussed, there could always be those incredible rewards as well, like plenty of that sunshine. Well, tell me what you think of the cons of living in the US Virgin Islands in the comment section below. If you like this vlog, please don't forget to give me a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more of my coming content here. Thank you for watching my vlog. Be free, gain wealth, and travel far.